In the Gospel according to Luke, Jesus tells an obscure parable. It's referred to as the dishonest steward. Rumors have reached the owner that the manager is not doing things appropriately, and so he resolves to fire the manager. But the manager, hearing of this, isn't sure what he's going to do. He's too weak to work digging ditches, and he's not going to have a job and doesn't want to be penniless. So he resolves what he's going to do. He goes to each of the creditors and negotiates with them a cheaper price than what they actually owed. In this way, they pay their full amount that is owed, but the manager, the owner, doesn't receive their full due. It's always been a question, how do we apply this? What do we do with it? Recently, the Presbytery had a church camp that was greatly in debt. They had a first mortgage for the purchase of the property that they'd only paid interest on for the last 50 years, never paying principal. They'd also taken out a second mortgage for the building of a building on that property, and they'd had additional years in which they'd gone in the red while we had budgeted to pay for expenses in the operating budget, but somehow they'd missed as to how much would actually be owed. In addition to which, there were years in which the camp, being a rustic camp, was often sued for a child who broke a leg or broke an arm or some other childhood accident. We came to a Presbyterian meeting in which we were going to hear what was actually owed. And the new managers, who hadn't yet had a year of work, were afraid that before they'd had a first summer, they'd be discharged. Hearing the report of what was owed, it suddenly occurred to me about this parable. And so I stood up and made the motion that we as Presbytery were the ones who were owed the first mortgage and the second mortgage and the amount of overages that had come each year in addition to the lawsuits. So there was a total of $500,000 that was owed by the Presbytery from the camp. And I suggested that we follow the parable of the dishonest steward and that we write it off as zero. That throughout the history of this camp for the last 50 years, it had always been kept in a debtor position, always been kept not able to do whatever it wanted to do. And perhaps by paying off the full amount of the debt, absolving them of what they had owed, they could do what they'd never before dreamed that they could do. They could offer the very best program possible. And with this, we could see what was possible. If at the end of future years we realized that the camp was again not making its fair share, then we could sell the camp without any encumbrance to it. But if in the intervening years some child had been reached, some new believer had gotten faith because of this, well and good. I'm Craig Lindsey, the senior pastor at the First Presbyterian Church here in Skaneateles, New York.